Hello, my name is Abby Hart. I'm senior editor of Landscape Management Magazine, and I am here with Britt Wood, CEO of the National Association of Landscape Professionals, as well as Andrew Bray, VP of Government Relations for the National Association of Landscape Professionals. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us, Abby. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you both. So I wanted to dig in and talk about the results of the election here. There are ongoing lawsuits and recounts before the results are finalized. I believe that Georgia's recount is finalized tomorrow. But is there any doubt as to the winner of the election at this present moment?
You know, I don't think so at this point. Just recently, I believe yesterday, I saw several lawsuits were dropped, even voluntarily, by some members of the Trump campaign that were fighting, specifically suits in both Pennsylvania and Michigan, which are probably two of the stronger suits that I think could have maybe carried some water. So I think when you look at the timeline, the way the states need to certify their results, several of them are certifying as early as this Friday, but the rest all have to be certified by about December 16th before basically Electoral College will meet in mid-December. And while I think, last week there may have seemed like some doubt, I don't think there really is anymore. You're starting to see the cracks in the Trump administration themselves, with some members of the cabinet beginning to try to begin to transition. And you're finally seeing some in the Senate, especially with regards to making sure President-elect Biden is receiving security briefings, basically say some things on the record that are showing even in the Republican leadership in the Senate starting to tend that way. So I believe that, for NALP's purpose, we are having to plan accordingly as we're looking at a Biden administration for the next 4 years, beginning January 20th.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that, Abby, is certainly as we look at a Biden administration, Andrew has his eye very closely on Georgia, and I know we'll probably get to that a little bit later in the Senate races there. How that plays out and the scenario of having a Republican Senate with a Democratic House and a Democratic president, and we'll hopefully get to this a little bit later, could wind up being a relatively good thing for the industry. So, those are the only additions that I would make to that.
Great. Thank you for that. Bring us up to speed there. So knowing that there is a new incoming administration, what are the major issues that face the green industry in regards to an incoming Biden administration, I guess as far as labor, H-2B, chemical regulations, et cetera?
I think you hit them, right out of the park with H-2B and some pesticide regulations is continuing to be our tier one priorities. And, just for anybody, watching this interview, we, operate through our Government Affairs Council at NALP, and we set our priorities every year. And we will once again, we're starting to do that process right now, but I fully anticipate H-2B, pesticides, and remaining an essential industry at the top of our list coming into the next year. And, I think with regards to a Biden administration, Britt's heard me say this, I think, in every interview the last few weeks, to be optimistic. There's, pluses and minuses to a Biden administration. And with regards to H-2B, I think the biggest strength we have is that the president hails from a state that is really understanding the H-2B program. Delaware in particular has a booming seasonal industry, but it also has a pretty good landscape industry as well. And we've had nothing but strong support out of the two senators that hail from the state, Senators Carper and Coons. I was actually talking to one of their staff earlier this week, and we're hopeful that he will understand that continued need for guest workers, even in an economy that seems to be faltering a little bit with higher unemployment rate than we'd had the last few years. So I'm optimistic, but I mean, there will be some challenges. The president is definitely and always has been and will always be aligned with labor unions, and labor unions continue to be a problem area for us. And then the other issue will be, where will immigration fall in his priorities for the next 30, 60, 90, 100 days? If immigration is something that the president wants to do, that's a tremendous opportunity for us. But if immigration continues to be a political hot ball or hot potato that just gets bounced around, that's a problem for us, because we get put behind an 8-ball, even though it's a labor issue. It gets conflated with an immigration issue, and then we get held up even with some Latino congressmen members that are supportive of us, but they don't want to do immigration piecemeal. And so we get stuck behind that. So, strengths and weaknesses, I know we'll talk about maybe some agency stuff leading up to where there could be some issues, but I'm optimistic. I think we knew that the Trump administration had become growingly hostile to the program. So I'd rather take kind of this unknown than maybe what we already knew. With regards to pesticides, though, we're definitely going to see some increased regulatory burdens coming out of the Environmental Protection Agency. I think we can anticipate that, but nothing that I don't think as an industry we can't handle. I think the big strength is that for the last 4 years, we've been fighting a lot of fights at the state and local level. And EPA has been demonized as Trump's EPA. Well, I don't believe that was true. That was the perception, and that was the attack against us, that pesticides are dangerous because this is Trump's EPA and they don't care about the environment. When we know that that wasn't true. So this being a Biden administration EPA lets us, go back to the foundation of how we are regulated to safely and responsibly use pesticides. So I think that's a huge plus for us.
And we continue to keep an eye on any legislation that may pop up related to pesticides or herbicides, and whether that at the federal, at the local level. But we had recently a very successful outcome in Prince George's County in Maryland. And that was due in large part to members getting actively involved. So, one of the things I know Andrew will be working on with a lot of our specifically our lawn care members, is really kind of developing a system with which we can activate people on a local level to get heavily involved and really have a way in as it relates to any of these pesticide or herbicide issues they're popping up at a local level.
That's some great information, gentlemen. It seems like there's some concerns, some challenges, some opportunities, but the need for LCOs to get involved and companies to get involved at a local level and become politically engaged still stands. So that's good to know. It looks like some names are being floated for cabinet positions in this Biden administration. Are there any people that we should be aware of that would be particularly supportive to the landscape industry, or is there anyone that you're particularly concerned about?
Yeah, I don't. When you look at the list and us geeks here in DC have been projecting what a Biden administration might look like for the last several months, but now the lists are really swirling. As you see that the president-elect has just put in place his chief of staff is Ron Klain, and then several other senior advisor positions. But when it comes to the three agencies that I think that are most important to us, you're talking about the Department of Homeland Security, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Labor. The Department of Homeland Security will probably be the first of those three to be named, but it still won't even be one of the first. I think you look at Secretary of State is probably that, and Defense is probably the first two, but DHS will probably be right behind that. And the names being floated out there, the only two that really continue to be pushed is one is Alejandro Mayorkas, who worked under the Biden administration and was not great on H-2B issues. The thing that's important to realize, though, is whoever comes into DHS isn't going to focus on H-2B. They're going to focus on rolling back all of the President Trump's kind of border issues isn't the right word. Some of his initiatives with regards to border security in DACA and some of the Muslim ban, those sort of things is what I think is going to preoccupy DHS, at least in the beginning. Another name that is getting floated, and you're going to hear me say this for the Department of Labor too, is somebody named Val Demings. And she was involved as one of the basically trial attorneys in the impeachment. Her star's really on the rise as somebody, a real power broker inside the Democratic Party. She was even rumored to be a finalist for the VP candidate. The only reason I'm going to say that she's not going to get it is that Congress and the House is such a narrow majority that I don't think the Democrats want to risk losing anybody in the House. Now, granted, she comes from a pretty Democratic district, but I think she might have her eyes on something more, but I could be wrong. So DHS, I think we kind of know what we're probably going to get. Everyone keeps circling that Mayorkas name. And like I said, he worked on the Biden administration, wasn't necessarily friendly to the H-2B program, but I also think that he's going to have some other priorities initially. The EPA, A couple names that continue to float around is one is Mary Nichols, who works for California Air Resources Board, and you know, she's in the process of putting through some clean air policy that isn't really one of our favorites right now. And not that we're against the policy. What they're trying to do is ban single cycle engines by about 2025 in California, which like I said, it's not something there's an industry necessarily against. We just think it's happening a little faster than the infrastructure would actually support it. To make sure everybody can properly use battery-powered equipment, and that it is also efficient and powerful enough to do what we need it to do. So, you know, she's obviously going to come in with her own agenda. Once again, she's going to spend some time rolling back some of the president's, you know, environmental policies, a lot of the stuff around more of the air and some of the coal and fossil fuel type stuff, where pesticide I don't think has a massive bullseye on its back right now. The other name in EPA that a lot of people may have remembered, he did run for president, is Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington State. I think if he doesn't get the EPA job, he's going to find his way someplace in the administration. We've heard something like as an environmental czar. But once again, I think that they have some other priorities than just pesticides. And I continue to believe we're going to be working with a lot of the same career professionals over at the Office of the Pesticide Programs that I've been working with for the last 7-8 years. And then the last one, Department of Labor. This list is where it gets murky. So rather than name a bunch of names that you might not know, I will say one name that is really starting to float there is Bernie Sanders. His time in the Senate may finally be over, and that's by his choice that I think he wants this. You know, I know this is recording this on air. I just can't see Bernie Sanders running, you know, the Department of Labor. I could be wrong. If he does, you know, I think it's going to present some problems. But I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I think they'll go with somebody a little more traditional, maybe straight out of a labor union. There's been a name like Bill Spriggs with the AFL-CIO that's a prominent name. So once again, it's a labor union. So we know, here's the thing about H-2B and Department of Labor. I've heard somebody else tell me this the other day, is that the labor unions technically can be bought. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it, that the labor unions really just want a higher wage, which is something that, you know, we as an industry have to discuss. What is the appropriate wage that we think that should be paid, if that makes sure we can get additional workers? And I think that's going to be the debate over the next 4 years, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to put a bow tie on this, we're not overwhelmingly concerned about the names that we're hearing about, but certainly I think eventually we will have our work cut out for us. But Andrew's already positioning himself well to be able to kind of work with the, you know, obviously with these 3 different departments to ensure that our issues are prioritized in the correct way. But, you know, I think the other thing is like there's going to be bigger fish to fry in the beginning. So for us to develop the relationships and continue to work with the career government workers in many of those agencies will be exceptionally helpful for us. And Andrew's done a great job of forging those relationships already. So we're feeling okay about where this stands and where it could go over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and Britt brought up a really good point I do want to just touch on for everybody. You know, you get this new administration and you're all excited to get all these things done. Well, so is everybody. So is every advocacy group, every lobbyist, every trade organization. Everyone wants to get their thing done immediately. So I just caution everybody for a little bit of patience, that we are going to be working on these issues. But, you know, unfortunately, H-2B isn't, you know, Congress's top priority in the next one. I just got to be honest with people. So just because our issues might not be front and center at the beginning, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it means nothing bad's happening to us. But also don't take it as we're not working on it. It just means that, you know, there is a process and there will be other priorities that get bumped in front of ours. So patience is going to be important here for the next 6 months, I believe.
Thank you for running down those names with us and for giving us a look at some of the key issues surrounding each potential cabinet member. You mentioned the California Air Resources Board and battery-powered equipment and regulations surrounding that. I know that those are topics that we're watching closely, especially as we're covering battery-powered equipment in our upcoming December issue. I'd like to thank you both. Thank you to Britt Wood and Andrew Bray from NALP for joining us today and giving us the association's perspective on this election. I'm Abby Hart, Senior Editor of Landscape Management Magazine, and thank you for watching Landscape Management at Home Edition.